Well, welcome everyone. My name is Joanne Geer, and I'm the Executive Director for the Westchester Biotech Project. And today we're going to have a really wonderful webinar. Are you an inventor or are you an entrepreneur? In a moment, I'm going to introduce you to Michael Welling, my co-chair and partner in Westchester Biotech Project. We got started a couple of years ago discussing how we can work together to energize relationships between researchers, engineers, and data scientists and leverage the benefits of the regional, national, international biotech resources to enhance human health. I'm not going to go into detail on all of these programs, but this will give you a sense of the range of activities that we're involved with. We like to work online because, of course, we have friends all over the world. We also like to gather people in small groups, like 20 people at a time, to think about a story or a challenge. And we also have larger programs. The big one that's coming up at Purchase College in Westchester County is Innovation in Research. This summer, we'll be doing a symposium on rare diseases. That's part of a larger effort to build a rare disease hub. In the fall, we'll be doing a workshop on starting your first laboratory. And then in October at the Burke Rehabilitation Hospital, a colloquium on tauopathy. And yeah, what did we forget? All of these came from the interests and energies of our community members. I'm going to start handing it over to Michael, and this is a really wonderful range of organizations that have been helping us, and we couldn't do it without them, so I want to thank them very much. Michael, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you very much, Joanne, and good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you're dialing in from. We are really excited about today's webinar, and I think that it represents sort of the intersection of what is really an exciting time in the industry. And I think that what you see from both our community partners who are participating in supporting our efforts, from the wonderful folks who are going to be leading today's discussion, and to all of you who are joining us today, there really is never been a better time to be involved in this field. There's never been a better opportunity to participate or collaborate in this field. And I just want to say that our success as an organization is really based on the fact that we are receiving contributions from all of you. So hopefully you hear something today or you read something on our website that leads you to want to reach out to us, and we welcome you to get involved at any time. But let's get to my honor and pleasure to introduce our moderator for today, Joe Magno. And Joe is the Executive Director of the North Carolina Center of Innovation Network, referred to as COIN. And NC COIN connects innovators and thought leaders across an array of scientific disciplines and sectors in North Carolina, and we're trying to get him much north of that. And that includes folks from the industries across biotechnology, agriculture, life sciences, nanobiotechnology, and nanomedicine. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Joe.
Hi, Joe. Okay, I'm going to make you the presenter, which should make your microphone available to Joe. There you go.
And our mission is all of those who work in the life sciences, science, and technology. And our mission, we're a membership organization, and our mission is very similar to Joanne's mission. And it gives me great pleasure today to introduce my friend Russell Thomas, who's the founder and CEO of NIRvana Sciences. So you know a little bit about Russell and how he can speak really intelligently about, are you an inventor or are you an entrepreneur? You should know that Russell directed the executive programs at North Carolina State University, and at the new venture services portion at at NCSU's, that's North Carolina State University, Springboard program. A number of years ago, Russell decided to start another company and started NIRvana. And since Russell has founded NIRvana, over the past few years, NIRvana has been able to grow very nicely through government grants, through equity, and through receiving monies from private investors. So without me talking too long, I'd like to introduce you to my good friend, Russell.
Hi, Russell.
Thank you, Joe.
This is Joanne. Russell, you should have a pop-up on your screen inviting you to share your screen.
Okay, see here.
If you don't have it, I'll send it again.
I do not.
All right.
Oh, wait.
Huh?
Okay, share.
There you go. Perfect.
You see it?
I do. And I really appreciate folks keeping your yourselves muted while we do our presentation, and to enter your questions in the chat box. We'll save the questions to the end, but we have a nice long time that we can have we can hear from you and your queries. Go ahead, Russell.
Okay, thank you, Joanne. So the presentation we're going to go through today is just a summary of just a lot of the different learnings that I've had across the way. As Joe mentioned, I used to work in the business school at NC State University, and then I went over to Springboard at NC State in the tech transfer office and started the New Ventures group there. But in all of my time, I've had a lot of conversations with the technical inventors who have a techno market insight, and had a lot of conversations and a lot of understanding of kind of the entrepreneurship space. And so, this presentation is really set forth to just provide context and more information, really for technical inventors who are really contemplating entrepreneurial ventures, and the different things that they will kind of need to understand and know along the way. And it's really meant to be a presentation that drives kind of an introspective, self-reflecting conversation with oneself about the role in starting the company and growing that company. So from an agenda perspective, I will go through each of these various topics just kind of at a high level, talk through them. You can refer to the slides later on if you want to read the details of the different slides. But basically I'm going to start with my perspective, talk about some basic definitions, and then go through some information on entrepreneurs and kind of their roles, a couple of patterns that I see CEOs have at very early stages of companies. I'm talking about the seed stage, Series A type time contexts. And so from really my core perspective of technology commercialization and early stage companies, one of the first things I learned way back in probably 1999 with the Technology Entrepreneurship and Commercialization program was they had this really nice quote, and the quote was, technologies don't kill companies, people kill companies. And the more that I've been involved with my own ventures and helped a whole lot of other ventures across a wide variety of technical disciplines, it tends to be the case. Startup companies require a group problem-solving mentality that spans both the technical dimension and the business dimension. And oftentimes when you have a technical problem or a business problem that can't be resolved, a lot of times it can boil down to a people issue. And so that's where I come at this world. And the other is, everybody asks the old entrepreneurial, question, and that is, do investors or do people bet on the jockey, or do they bet on the horse? Okay, so the jockey is the management team, often referred to, and the horse is referred to as the technology platform. And it's funny, from a kind of an academic perspective, there's academic validation on both perspectives. You can bet, you're better to bet on the jockey, the management team, and sometimes you're better to bet on the technology platform that perhaps is so compelling it can override a subpar management team or subpar management decisions. So, but I wanted to take this a little bit further and, really kind of talk about the horse bet. And, in my time, each year you see a certain percentage of new technologies that come out that are really so compelling that the sheer magnitude of their technological disruption is so compelling that they're going to be pulled into the market regardless if they have an average management team or perhaps even a subpar management team. It's a really good solution to a much needed problem, and the venture just gets pulled into the marketplace. But for the other 90% of people in opportunities, I break it down into defining success across 5 different dimensions. And so the first dimension of success for the rest of us, shall we say, I break success into 5 categories: tremendous success, success, not a success, The Walking Dead, and roadkill. And I don't know if there's a formal definition of this. This is again my perspective, but I define tremendous successful outcome for a startup company is one in which the company has actually captured the full potential of its technology's product advantage. And fundamentally we're talking about achieving sales revenue goals or acquisition price that's kind of 75+% in line with the original vision of the company when we had nothing but pure hope and hopes of grandeur. The next level of success is simply achieving a revenue goal and acquisition price that personally validates the effort. Okay, so an example of this might be as simple as, you're able to sell the company for $5 million on a $2.5 million investment, and that gives the technical co-founders, the management team, a nice sense of validation and gives them some money in the pocket, and anything beyond that is fantastic, right? Not a success, and I'm using the term not a success as opposed to the term failure here, because I still think not a success is still a good outcome, in the sense that you ran the new venture experiment, it did not work as desired, as planned, and it was closed down. So it was a good experiment to run. The technology and the product advantages did not come about as hoped, and so the company ran its course and is just appropriately shut down. And I also throw into this category of, fundamentally achieving a $5 million exit, but you raised $10 million. Okay, that to me is not a success. Okay. Now, for the next 2 categories of The Walking Dead and roadkill, were really kind of the fundamental genesis of why I wanted to put this slide deck together and why I've been asked to, talk about this topic a couple of times. Walking Dead is a term of a new venture in which the team still has the belief, the hope that its technology can enable a product advantage, but it cannot open the right doors to get a significant point of validation. Okay, so this is where a team for multiple years is trying, and usually the team is made up of 2 to 5 people, usually predominantly biased towards the technical side, and they have the hope and belief that their technology has the advantage to one day open doors, but they fundamentally haven't been able to organize the venture and get to a compelling commercial validation point to really move beyond that core group. Okay, and I've seen companies stay in this mode of operation for 6, 7, 8, 9 years, and I would really, so this presentation is really to help provide more insight so people can avoid that scenario. The last scenario, which is what I call is roadkill, this is a situation in which the company implodes for a variety of reasons, but fundamentally it implodes because of a core people issue or personality issue in which people dynamics fundamentally stop the company from moving forward, and it stops people from wanting to help one another, to help problem solve, to make progress. And in the end, you know, these are the ventures that just go away in a bad implosion of he said, she said, and, you know, nobody's happy and it was a bad experience for everyone. So, you know, again, the crux of this presentation is to help people understand more about being an inventor, being an entrepreneur, to help you attain a success of tremendously successful success or not a success. So just some basic definitions. So an entrepreneur is one who organizes and manages an enterprise, especially a business, usually with considerable initiative and risk. An inventor is a person who invents, okay, especially one who devises some new process, appliance, machine, article, okay? So an invention is something new, useful, process, machine. Okay, these definitions come from Webster's online dictionary, and really I use it to make a simple point, and that is an inventor is the one who is inventing something new, and an entrepreneur is one who is organizing and managing, okay? So some unique attributes of inventors, typically often great problem solvers. They tend to have a lot of ideas. They tend to keep some of their most valuable ideas kind of closest to themselves. They embrace failure, so they're not afraid to fail from a research perspective, which is great. You need to have that in science-based companies. They love tinkering. They have a boundless curiosity that goes with this. They're creative, persistent, self-confident, self-motivated. Some typical blind spots of inventors, in my experience, is, you know, they often overestimate the maturity of their technology platform, and this is creates all sorts of issues in terms of when to start the company, when to raise capital, when to attract the management team, and more. They typically vastly underestimate the amount of money and resources needed to develop and launch a successful product. I typically, in the conversations that I've had with many inventors, many faculty members across different universities, what my rule of thumb is, you know, I've developed over the years is oftentimes inventors who have not gone down the entrepreneurial path yet, or have not been highly involved in a product development process in a corporate world, you know, typically believe that the resources needed to bring their technology to fruition is probably 80% less than what is actually needed. Stated a different way, they think with 20% of the total resources they can get to the end game, and usually 5x more is actually needed. Many inventors have insufficiently verified that its technical advantage has commercial value. And, you know, we can talk about voice of the customer and a lot of other things, but fundamentally, where I see a lot of inventors get in trouble is they've had three conversations, ad hoc conversations with individuals about their technology and the potential of their technology, and they actually think that makes a pattern worthy of taking the technology to market. And they give you a sense of, I don't think a technology should be even contemplated for commercialization until the core group has actually had 40 conversations with people in the marketplace, potential users, potential customers, potential buyers, before I think there's sufficient enough information and confidence to make a venture. And that is usually probably 10x the number that most inventors think is needed to actually validate an idea. And lastly, kind of cold calling skills, which are fundamentally really, really helpful in opening collaborative doors, tends to be a challenge for many inventors. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the myth of the entrepreneur here. And, you know, there's all this misinformation about are entrepreneurs born or made? And so there's, you know, been 50 years of entrepreneurship personality research. And, you know, it all early on focused on high need for achievement, high risk tolerances, you know, basically grounded in a belief that, you know, static personality traits determine the person's entrepreneurial outcomes, okay? Meaning entrepreneurs are born. But fundamentally, the research has shown there is no entrepreneurial personality. So if you take a Myers-Briggs, there is no Myers-Briggs personality that is core to becoming an entrepreneur, okay? So there's no systematic differences between personality traits, okay? So that fundamentally led to a decade-long hiatus at the entrepreneurial research in the academic world. And so in the midst of these dark ages, shall we say, Busenitz and Barney came up with, you know, the concept that entrepreneurs don't display higher risk tolerances because they don't perceive the risk. Okay, meaning they see a problem and they see a solution and they don't see it as being incredibly risky as others. So, you know, further research, they've kind of come up with this cognitive approach where entrepreneurs think differently than the general population, and it's usually they have a higher propensity to use biases and heuristics. They have an overconfidence bias, meaning they don't see these opportunities as risky. And two, they use representative heuristics, and they use patterns in the external environment to spot opportunities, okay? So, you know, more refined support for cognitive approach, you know, basically belief in entrepreneur is more, belief that one can be an entrepreneur is actually more important than the belief in your ultimate success. So basically I've laid the line down that, you know, you can be an inventor, people can become entrepreneurs as well, but there's a lot more to go with this. And so if, you know, for kind of a chunk of the remaining presentation, I'm going to talk a bit about, you know, kind of what I see as successful entrepreneurial characteristics. So one of the key characteristics that I see in successful entrepreneurs, and a successful entrepreneur that I'm defining here is a person who has had a couple of successful ventures, not just a person who has gone off with their own startup company, but really a person who has done multiple different ventures and really has validated that they're a bona fide serial entrepreneur. One of the things that I've observed in these individuals, they do really well at thinking constantly in problem solution sets, where they really understand context, they understand the market and technological forces going on, they have a great ability to understand what the root problem is that actually needs to be solved with the new technology. They have a strong concept of the solution. They understand the resulting context of how the market will change based upon these new products. And they understand the rationale at how to make this argument work. And so this really problem and solution set is really, really core to understanding and becoming a successful entrepreneur, really at really what I think is the founding level of companies. They also have, like many of us, a passion for bringing the technology platform to fruition. They really like to organize and advance and succeed in a world awash with incomplete information. They can formulate a strategy, which is AKA a plan to win. They're typically very impatient, They can both think big and small, the 80,000-foot level and the 5,000-foot level, and many more characteristics which you can read. And so, but let me go back, sorry. But one of the core things here is that in overlap between inventors and entrepreneurs, many inventors are quite good at these problem and solution sets, okay? In order to become a successful researcher, you usually have to be quite good at this. What a lot of the inventors lack in really understanding the problem and solution sets in a commercial context is really the market information and the fundamental product knowledge that's out in the marketplace these days, and that is not trivial to develop. So in the term of entrepreneur, you know, it's quite a flexible label. I've heard entrepreneurs labeled as anyone who started a company from 0 employees to someone who's joined a 50-employee company and taken it to 150 employees. I've heard, you know, entrepreneurs labeled as successful if they've never had a single success, or you need to have 2 or 3 successes. One of the things that's core for me in terms of what makes an entrepreneur is they're really heavily involved at the early stage of a venture, whether it be the seed stage or kind of the Series A stage. But what they're heavily involved with is attracting resources to the company, capital, people, partners, developing, delivering a differentiated and customer valued product, and really strategically impacting the results of the startup company by building multiple parts of a viable company. And down here, many of you may not be familiar with Michael Porter's value chain, but this is just a nice diagram that actually breaks out the different operations of a company into its 9 components. But fundamentally, at an early stage, you know, usually entrepreneurs have a pretty good understanding of the basics of most or all of these different functional pieces of a company. And so, you know, what we're trying to get to is many people are solely entrepreneurs, okay? Some people are entrepreneurs and inventors, but many people are solely inventors and not entrepreneurs. Okay, so this is, again, just trying to drive a introspective and reflective conversation out there. But in the end, it is the skill sets between inventing and the skill sets between being an entrepreneur and organizing and managing and growing a venture are substantially different. And it's very rare that an individual overlaps with both of those worlds, okay? And we can all talk about examples of inventors who have become successful entrepreneurs. They are real. They're commonly cited on Yahoo and a lot of different websites. Bill Gates, Jim Goodnight, who is the founding CEO of SAS down here in RTP. But they're very, very rare individuals. And because we see them a lot, we have, I think, a misunderstanding that they're fairly frequent. But in reality, they're incredibly rare birds. So going a little bit further on kind of the entrepreneur and the startup CEO perspective, I actually see 3 different patterns for startup CEOs. One pattern is where the individual is both the inventor and the entrepreneur, and who is customer problem and product solution centric. Okay, and these are the types of CEOs that I see most inventors directly advance into at an early stage. But fundamentally, these are individuals who have a deep and unique expertise of the technology. They can listen and understand customer needs and translate them accurately into product design and specifications. They're heavily involved on the R&D side of things, but they possess really average to above average leadership and management skills, okay, which is really key. But in the end, you know, the rare inventor who can also become an entrepreneur, you know, fundamentally has the skill to deliver a viable product that truly solves a customer need, okay, which is a great place to start a company. But in the end, I make them similar to a VP of product development. The next pattern is an entrepreneur who is networking, team building, and fundraising focused. And basically, they have a triangle in which they look at what's achievable from a product offering standpoint. They look at customer needs out there. They talk to investors. They understand what investors are interested in. And they fundamentally take a market need, technology options, and investor interest, that triangle. And they actually optimize that triangle to come up with a new venture concept. And then they use the best technology to solve that market problem. Okay, so I fundamentally call these folks really the deal makers because they dynamically align these stakeholders on the fly. And the third type of startup CEO is one who really takes a comprehensive approach to the commercialization process of really formulating a business strategy from the ground up. They really strongly link the technical capabilities of the platform with you know, unique protectable offerings validated in a customer need and a strong product concept that will have value. And then they fundamentally develop the business strategy that envelops the right marketing operations, financial strategy, and a highly competitive business case. And so they fundamentally, from the ground up, starting with the technology, build the case for that technology, understanding that sometimes technologies should not be commercialized through a startup company. And so from a startup CEO's responsibility from pre-seed standpoint, it's about creating a vision, gathering the resources for startup, validating the optimal technology product market linkage, assembling the team, attracting mentors, and fundamentally creating momentum. At the seed stage, you know, a CEO's responsibility is, again, selling the vision, attracting resources, managing product development in a way that really solves a real customer problem, manages the market engagement, manages the technology strategy and IP development, properly sequences the people you bring onto the team to optimize the growth of the team, and really develops a high-performing culture of company sustainability and high performance. And again, creates momentum. And, you know, in the end, a startup CEO's core job is to really develop the people talent across the management team, the R&D team, the board of directors, and the scientific and industry advisory board. This is, in essence, core to what the founding CEO does. And so just thinking about different ways inventors can engage a company if they don't want to become a co-founder. Well, just different ways an inventor can engage a company. So they can look at it as simply as, I'm not going to get significantly involved in a venture. I'm going to support my licensing office as they transfer the technology to the new company. I'm going to simply collect royalty checks from that and help solve problems along the way, but act as much more of an advisor. In many instances, though this is insufficient, the technology will not go anywhere because there's usually just simply too much risk. In many instances, it needs additional time to incubate in a startup company. And so one can become a founder, a co-founder, a scientific advisor, CSO, or fundamentally, if you want to make the argument to become a CEO, you better be darn sure that you've got a whole lot of people around you that will help provide the entrepreneurial perspective. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to questions.
Well, thank you, Russell. Thank you, Russell. This is Joanne Gear again. And when I encourage everyone to enter your questions in the chat box, we're going to have some initial discussion amongst ourselves here. So I'm going to introduce Nathan Anderson, who's an independent consultant in biopharma strategy and operations. Russell, would you like to get us started?
Hi, thanks, Joanne. Thank you very much, Russell, for that great conversation. I think what really comes through is the trying to figure out what your strengths and weaknesses are, and not trying to do everything, not trying to be both the inventor and the entrepreneur, if that's maybe not within your skill set. So I think my first question maybe is how do you know which one you are? Is that just kind of reflection on your personality, on what you like, or do you have to maybe give both a shot, or what's the best way to figure out, am I an inventor or am I an entrepreneur?
Right. Well, I think I would, if this is your first venture, for sure, I would really plan to put the hat that you're an inventor on, and that, you know, you should work through your network to try to find individuals who have those entrepreneurial skills that you can then team up with to fundamentally start to organize your technical opportunity. And so, you know, that is where I typically start things, and I'm making the assumption that the individual, the inventor, still has a continued interest to develop the core technology. You know, they still want to stay on the technical side. If you're an inventor, but you've come to the decision point that you are done inventing and you are willing to turn over the reins of scientific advancement to other people, and you want to fully take on the role of becoming an entrepreneur and in essence do a career shift to that, then I would still encourage you to work to find mentors, but those are really, in my mind, you know, two distinctly different paths and not particularly overlapping well. And so that would be my response, Nathan.
Okay, thanks. And so we know that kind of I think you pointed out that you need a team, you need a network, you need mentors, you need help commercializing your product. How do you make sure that that machine is running smoothly, that those relationships are running smoothly? Or how do you know if things might be getting too complicated and you're turning into a Walking Dead company or a roadkill company where things just kind of went haywire? What are the warning signs?
Right. Oh, that's actually a really good question. For me, the warning signs of the Walking Dead companies, which a lot of science-based companies unfortunately end up in, is really the combination of progress and time. Okay, because time continues to move forward and progress may not. And so, you know, fundamentally, you really should, you know, as a team, kind of sit down and set expectations early on. You know, we need to hit these technical milestones, these kind of validation milestones along the way over 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, and return to those expectations probably on an annual basis. And, you know, at some point, if you've set those expectations out, you're gonna see a huge deviation from where you wanted to be to where you are. And that's something that if you do on a specific time basis, it just keeps you in the habit and keeps you focused, because it's real easy to let other things, less important things to the venture, crop up, and it's going to take 4 months, it's going to take 3 months, and next thing you know, you're 16 months behind where you wanted to be. Mm-hmm. And, you know, so really managing that as a team and having just forthright, open, direct conversations is really critical. And then fundamentally developing a culture within your team of calling people out when they don't deliver, you know, is something that Walking Dead teams seldom do. but is fundamentally core to actually getting your venture up and going and creating momentum. You cannot let that, those freeloaders, shall we say, slow down the venture too much. And you will occasionally need to be very frank with individuals just in terms of amount of work.
Okay, yeah, so yeah, I think that's, so kind of my takeaways there were transparency, communication, and yeah, metrics and goals, right? To make sure that this is what we set out to do, this is how we're doing it, this is where we need to invest more time, more energy.
Right, and the last is the expansion of the team.
Mm-hmm.
If you're 24 months in and you've added one team member, that is completely insufficient.
Okay. No, thank you, Russell. So we're getting some questions on the chat. And so if you have any questions, please feel free to enter them. One of the questions, so we mentioned Myers-Briggs earlier on as a personality tool, very popular. Are there any other available tools that one can use for self-assessment to try to figure out how they fit into the overall structure?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff. I'm not sure what one has access to. There's a test, I think it was called the Entrepreneurial Attitude Orientation test, which was a survey just to look at students, kind of entrepreneurial orientation and how that changed over the course of time as they went through their entrepreneurial education in a business school. But that kind of assessment would be helpful. Another one that I'm a really big proponent of is a personality test called the Big Five. And the Big Five is a personality test that is different than a Myers-Briggs, but one of the things that dimensions it tests for is neuroticism. and of all the companies that I'm familiar with that have gone under the roadkill category of success down there, I can assure you almost every single one of them has had one or two members that have had neurotic behavior that have fundamentally destroyed the company's ability to advance. And I won't get in a bunch of different ways that can be done, but trust me, there's a whole lot of ways that can be done. But, it really can come down to something simply as basic as some people, and I've worked with a lot of PhDs, okay, and even I want to say maybe a third of people with PhDs still have a fundamental problem with the concept of stock dilution. Okay, so stock dilution fundamentally is where I had 10% ownership of the company, but now I have 5% ownership of the company. So when you raise capital, this is what happens. And that capital is critical to the success of many companies. But as your percentage ownership in a company goes down from, let's say, 10% to 5%, the value of that 5% should go up 2, 3, 4x, right? So the value that you have of the company, even though your ownership of the company goes down, the value of the venture has gone up. But there are a significant amount of people who subconsciously have a really hard time with that. You're taking half away from me. And it's just something that I believe is primal, but that one dimension is really, really important to get out on the table and talk about early with your co-founders. And, it's something that you really need to have good, clear conversations with inventors on. Entrepreneurs who've been through the process, they understand and they've gotten comfortable with it. But many inventors going through it for the first time, it's a real issue that needs to be discussed.
Sure, yeah, and I think, my takeaway there is, I think you mentioned this right off the bat, the first slide, the people are really as important as the technology.
Absolutely.
95% of the time, right? And so it's important that you get the right personalities involved and the people that are able to build those kind of team relationships that really advance the product successfully, right? Mm-hmm.
I'd just like to join
we
the
have another.
conversation for a moment here. This is Joanne. Thank you, everyone so far. It's been a great conversation. I just want to comment, that question about Myers-Briggs came from our friend Keith Safian, who's on our advisory board, and he is the chair for our virtual executive in residence program. And we are developing, we have a really wonderful cohort of advisors, and we started this program because we started to get ad hoc questions that were relevant for moving technologies along and developing commercialization strategies. And I'll just say from this very brief conversation on stock dilution, it's giving me an idea for maybe another session from the inventor's viewpoint to really think about what does a roadmap look like when you bring in investors and those first couple of years of a company. Wanted to share that. The other thing I wanted to mention is our program called Young Investigators, which is for sort of folks in that PhD postdoc era through about age 40. The first 10 or 15 years of a career where one might well take an entrepreneurial approach, one might well work with entrepreneurial companies, and of course, we're all interested in seeing new companies succeed. So I encourage everyone who is on today to reach out to us if you have any questions about ways that we might be able to help you. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Joanne. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, very important. We have another question from the chat that I think kind of ties in with that. So we have, the Westchester Biotech Project. Down here we have NC Coin. We are here at the First Flight Venture Center. And another question in the chat, these entrepreneurship centers, there are a lot of them around. How early an inventor get involved with these organizations? For advice, for technology, is there a risk to getting involved too early? Like, what's the right time to start reaching out to get these questions answered that you need to move forward with commercialization?
So if I were in the inventor's shoes, I would plan to break out these things wearing two different hats. The one hat I would put on is, kind of the new venture cap, and just, going to different entrepreneurial events and kind of just understanding the entrepreneurial world more in depthly, webinars, face-to-face meetings, talks with entrepreneurs. I mean, that in and of itself is a great asset, regardless of whether you're going to stay in investor or whether you want to change careers and really go the entrepreneurial route. And then the other hat is actually doing due diligence on one's own technology and getting feedback on the commercial value of one's technology. And so in doing so, one can usually have what's called black box conversations with other people. And the black box conversation is simply one in which you don't tell them how the technology works. You describe to them what the technology does that is better than other technologies out there, and what product advantage it can create. So, the value proposition is usually, required for this, but fundamentally what you're talking about is an acronym called PFAB, which is Product Feature Advantage Benefit. You have a technology that has a unique feature that can enable this advantage and provide this product with this benefit. And so, you need to learn to have black box conversations about your technologies first, practice with some of your coworkers, and then set out into the entrepreneurial environment to start to get feedback on that. Regarding, business plans and all that, your entrepreneurial support system usually has tremendous amount of insight and help to do that. But if you're going to go down that learning curve by yourself, you better plan to get another PhD or another degree, because it's a lot of work. Hence, finding someone who already has that can become a really important team member and shorten that learning curve for your team is extremely helpful.
Is that the one possible drawback to getting involved too early, is accidentally disclosing something that you don't want to disclose from an intellectual property perspective, or are there other?
Yeah, you just need to develop good intellectual property management habits.
Okay. Okay. Great. Thank you. No, it's a good question and a very interesting answer. Another question I had, you mentioned this on one of your slides, kind of the transition from being a scientist to being an entrepreneur. One of those characteristics is being comfortable with incomplete information. I've definitely noticed this where as an inventor, as a scientist, you kind of want to know everything. You do a lot of very, deep diving. You got to read every paper. That's not the way that entrepreneurship works. It's not the way the business world works. It's more of a higher level perspective. So how do you make that transition? Is that something you have to practice, or is that just something like a mindset of knowing what you have to focus on, what you have to prioritize, being an inventor versus being an entrepreneur?
It's both practice and mindset. Mm-hmm. A perfect example, and I've been in many meetings here, in which we're meeting with a group of people in which they have great insight in terms of the product and the market. And an example, meeting, with a technical individual who's very knowledgeable about the technology, can ask questions and go down a rabbit hole of spend, 20, 30 minutes of precious time, wanting to know more about, the technological side of things, when in reality, that is not the important objective for the meeting. The important objective for the meeting is to get feedback from these key stakeholders in terms of product and commercial applications. And so, it is a situation in which one needs to understand what are the goals of the meeting that I'm going into. And, we all stay focused on what we know dear to our heart and what we know the most, right? And so because of that, we try to go down those paths. And, having a comfort in, hey, going into a meeting where a lot is going to be discussed on stuff I do not fully know, but I need to learn, is just something that everybody needs to get good at. And so that would be my response.
No, definitely. I think that's a very important point, is that everybody has their own kind of biases and their own perspectives. And so what you think is important might not actually be important. And you have to get that feedback. You have to get that other people's perspectives on what might actually be a priority instead, right? And that's kind of what we're saying. You need to build that team, you need to build that network, and get those relationships going. Right.
I want to ask both of you to talk a little more about finding the other. So I know entrepreneurs tend to be out there all the time looking for new opportunities. But from the inventor's perspective, can you suggest, we all have to jump out of our comfort zone to make change happen. But can you talk a little bit about how one might go about finding the other? I say, what, I really want to be the inventor. I obviously need a partner who is the entrepreneur. What do I do next?
How do you find those people?
Yeah, so there's no silver bullet on this one, but it's really a matter of shaking a lot of trees and giving yourself more options of different people with different skill sets that you can engage. And over the course of fundamentally, I think 6 to 9 months, engage with them in multiple conversations, 6 to 9, kind of deep conversations before one really knows whether there's a good fit from a team perspective. So, I run a chemistry company, and the most important thing is team chemistry, right? So if I were in inventor's shoes, I'd probably do a couple different things. One, first you have to, get comfortable with the notion that you want to pull the trigger on getting serious about, looking at a startup company. Doesn't mean you actually have to do one, but you actually have to say, I'm gonna take this seriously, okay, and do it with forthright effort. Second thing is, reaching out. If you got a tech transfer office at a university, that's a fantastic place to start. The venture mentors systems that you guys have in place is a great place to start. And, you know, the more you can come up with an opportunity to simply sell what you're trying to do and find interested people who have entrepreneurial experience or corporate experience in that space is a great place to start. If I were doing it, probably the first place I would start is I'd find a couple of companies that are akin to the company that I'm about ready to start. And I would go look at their board of advisors and go look at their board of directors and their management team and see who's out there, get some names of individuals, and typically on a board of advisors, you know, those people know a lot of people. And so starting to develop your network that overlaps with some of the people in the industry is a great place to start. And if you can find a company that was recently shut down, recently acquired, that was in your space or a similar space, those team members make phenomenal places to start about growing your own entrepreneurial team, okay? And again, this goes back to the ability to cold call people you don't know, okay? But it's really important for driving these boundary spanning activities. Nathan?
No, definitely, yeah. I think that was on your first slide or second slide as well. You got to be comfortable doing the research, figuring out who you need to get in touch with, and then just reaching out to them and going to networking events, going to pitch events, going to whatever's out there in the ecosystem, and like you said, just perfecting your pitch, being able to know who you need to reach out to, and then just going out there and figuring out what you need to get done.
Right. So I think one of the most important things, most important point on this topic is you need to sell your concept, okay? And you need to inform enough people out there that are in your neighborhood, right, of what you're trying to do. But in reality, what will likely happen is people in your network who know you're trying to do this will identify somebody in their network that you don't know, and they will make an introduction between the two of you. So, you know, usually 3 out of 4 times finding that kind of entrepreneurial team member comes from a friend, an acquaintance who knows you're trying to do X, and they know somebody else that would have an interest in X, and they put you guys together. It's only a quarter of the time that I see someone, you know, proactively, I'm searching for a team member, boom, 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 that they can find the right teammate. It's the combination of the two-way street that really increases your odds to really find the right people.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely, yeah, thanks, Russell, very important.
Thank you so much. We have just a minute left. I want to say thank you. Each of you, please think about your final comments. But while you're doing that, I'd like to thank Russell Thomas and Nathan Anderson and Joe Magno and Michael Welling, and a shout out to Chris Kinzel, who helped to organize this moment. All of our programs come from questions and ideas we received from our community. So any thoughts, responses, ideas for future programs, we're very much interested in. Nathan, would you like to do you have a summary comment you'd like to share?
Sure, Joanne. No, I think thank you very much, Russell, for the great presentation, bringing up some excellent points about knowing what kind of if you're an inventor or an entrepreneur, and then figuring out what you need to do next to advance whatever idea, whatever inventions you have, so that they're successful commercially.
Okay. And this is Russell. You know, the point in kind of summarizing this is it's a complicated startup world out there, and the more teammates you can add to your momentum of your opportunity is just required for success. And, you know, typically first timers don't really realize that until, unfortunately, they've gone down that path. And so the intent of the presentation is to ask everybody who's contemplating these opportunities to just really think about the early stage team and really think about adding teammates who are a great fit from both personality perspective as well as from a market understanding perspective, because in my experience, those are the teams that just simply grab momentum and really head off to a very successful direction.
Well, that's a wonderful final word. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.